Kimberly Schmidt is the county ag educator with Shawano County, so she's going to tell us about her position. So, Kimberly.
Hi. You can go to, I'll give you a little bit of a background of my education and kind of where I got to today, and then we can go into maybe what I typically do in a work week. So I grew up in Shawano County, and I attended Wittenberg-Bertowood High School. And while growing up, I did not grow up on a farm. I did live out in the country per se, but I wasn't super connected to agriculture until I took an ag class in high school, and I took ag all 4 years of my high school. And I had a really great ag teacher that I always try to shout out whenever I give any of these talks. She really put the passion and the love of agriculture in me. And I also have a passion for animals. I really love animals. So when I was in high school, I had started thinking that I wanted to pursue a career as a vet. So I worked at a vet clinic that did both small and large animals. So they went out to the dairies, they had horses, but they also had dogs and cats. So I had tried to get some relevant job experience before I had entered college. And when it came time to apply for colleges, I ended up applying to UW-Madison. I attended there all 4 of my years, and I got a Bachelor's of Natural Science majoring in animal science. And while there, I learned that there is a lot more that you can do with a passion for agriculture and a passion for animals. Another thing that I also learned is how to adjust my expectations. Many of you are maybe aware, maybe not aware, but to get into vet school, you need an extremely high GPA. And it can be a little bit challenging your first couple of years of college, and I did not get a 4.0, so I had to start looking at other options because I knew it would be a lot harder for me to get into vet school. So I got involved in a bunch of different organizations that were ag-related on campus. I also got a job in a research lab that studied dairy nutrition. And that's where I kind of found another passion within a passion. I really loved nutrition and how that all worked. So after working in the research lab for about 2 years, my senior year, I also got an internship working with a feed company. And I learned about ration balancing and all that. And after graduating, I wasn't really feeling confident enough that I knew enough to go out and get a job. So I decided to pursue graduate school. And I ended up down at the University of Tennessee, where I got a master's degree in animal science again, but my research that I did down there focused on heat stress and protein metabolism in lactating dairy cattle. And I guess the one thing I would point out about grad school too, and another reason I chose that, I didn't even end up, by the time I got to be a senior, I didn't even end up applying to vet school. And there's a couple of reasons, and I'm not saying this to discourage anybody if they want to be a vet, like totally pursue that, but this would be the reasons that I did not decide to. The first one being, while my GPA was not a bad GPA, it was not a 4.0. Also, vet school costs money. And I had already spent quite a bit of money getting my bachelor's degree, and I didn't want to go into any more student debt. And a lot of times, not all times, but a lot of times when you pursue a master's or a PhD, you'll get what is called an assistantship. So I had a research assistantship, which meant that I worked for my professor that I was studying under, and they paid me to go to grad school. So they paid all of my tuition costs, plus they paid me a stipend to live off of. I wasn't living high on the hog, but it was definitely enough to get me through. So that's why I chose to pursue that, because it was a way to pay for my education without having to go into more debt. The other thing you can do besides doing a research assistantship is sometimes you have teaching assistantships. And that's where they have you're like a teacher's aide to the professor. So you help them teach their classes, or maybe you lead a discussion or a lab section for them. And that's how you would earn your keep. So spent 2 years in Tennessee. I learned a lot, and I went in there thinking that I needed to learn more to go out and get I don't want to say a real job, but to start pursuing my career. And what I learned was you can never know enough. Grad school's really good at like teaching you that there's a lot out there to know, and it just takes time. So after I finished that up, I started looking for positions as a dairy nutritionist. And I ended up working for a cooperative in West Central Wisconsin for about 2 years, and I did feed sales. I really enjoyed interacting with farmers, helping them solve problems, and I really do love formulating diets. But the part that I was not so excited about, and the part that made it a little bit more difficult for me and my personality and my temperament, was doing cold calling. I am not a fan of pulling into people's driveways and like trying to convince them to like buy feed from me. I just wanted to be there to offer solutions, and it's not that easy. You really have to work on relationship building and a bunch of other stuff. So while I learned a lot about relationship building, and I learned a lot about dairy nutrition by applying it in the field, it wasn't a job that I thought that I would be 100% happy with forever. So I always just kind of kept my eye on other available jobs out there. And that's how I came to extension. So this job came up for extension. I applied for it. I got it. Even though my background is in dairy nutrition, I actually am qualified as a crops and soils educator for extension. So what I have tried to do with my background in dairy nutrition and my expectation to program in the more agronomy side of things is I look a lot at forages. So one thing that I have always taken with me since undergrad up through my master's degree and now in extension is I do love to participate in research, and extension is really good at allowing us to do research projects and bring some of that on-farm research to the university. So on the side here, there's a picture of an alfalfa plot I had this summer. We were looking at sulfur and I'm going to forget, potassium, and there's one more. Oh, I should have looked this up before. But some different nutrients and what effect that they would have on yield and quality. And we harvested it off of my little square there with my hedge clippers, like 128 plots 3 times this summer. So even though COVID had kind of derailed some of our plans, I definitely found a way to keep myself busy out in the field this year. This middle picture is of another project that I'm working on where we are looking at feeding rye or triticale to dairy cattle, because a lot of times those crops are used as what's called a cover crop, where it gets planted in the fall and it grows in the spring and helps add biomass to the soil, as well as helping prevent soil erosion. And there's a lot of benefits to them, but sometimes when we have feed shortages, they can also be utilized by the cattle on the farm as well. So we're looking at doing nutrition modeling and like how those would fit in dairy cattle diets. And then the last picture is of tar spot, which is a fungal disease, and I helped scout for that the summer of 2019 by walking a couple fields in Shawano County, and I sent that down to a state specialist. The mission statement, and this is part of the universities too, is something called the Wisconsin Idea, where we're here to bring our research to the people and make it more consumable by those. So that's something that I always try to do with these research plots, Another thing we do is host meetings when it's not COVID, and we have our state specialists who are the professors at the university come and talk to our farmers and agronomists. And we also write resources with them and try to get the information out about the different things that we are doing. And then during COVID, we've tried to adapt that, and here's some virtual programming and webinars that I've helped with this year. And then I guess I'll just finish up and mention that, like, in a typical work week, I am usually planning these types of programs. I'm planning my research projects, or I'm actively working on my research projects. I am working with organizations within the county, whether it be our Forage Council or Farm Bureau or dairy promotions. There's a lot of organizations that I attend their meetings and try to partner with on certain stuff. And then I also get a lot of questions as well. That's also part of my job, is to be there to answer people's questions. So people call me to ID bugs. I help them with their feed inventories. If there's a government program that's happening, a lot of times Extension helps with the education portion of it. It helps farmers understand, like, when you sign up for it, what does that mean? Or is this a good option for you or not? And a slew of other questions, if you can think of it, probably somebody has asked Extension about it. So I think I covered everything.
Hey. One question I would have, you mentioned an internship with a feed company while you were in college. Do you think that's something that it would be possible for a high school student even to possibly get involved with a seed company or feed company that early?
Maybe. I would actually suggest, and this is something that I wish I would have done. I didn't grow up on a farm. I wish I would have gotten a job milking cows. Now that sounds, it sounds like, well, maybe you don't want to, not that there's anything wrong with milking cows, but you're going to probably say, well, if I want to be a nutritionist, why am I milking cows? Just to be on the farm day to day. And I did gain some of that experience through doing different projects and stuff, but I never physically did a long period of time where I was milking cows in a farm setting. And I think that is probably more valuable than trying to get in with like a feed company. You can maybe ask to job shadow and like ride along, but they usually reserve their internships for college age students. The other thing you could do, you could also work in the feed mill. You could, if they have a position open, and if you're old enough, there might be some OSHA things with like heavy machinery and that. But even if you had an intern, or if you wanted to do a summer job working in the feed mill too, I think that would be beneficial. But I would say if you're in high school, maybe get a job on farm to gain some of that experience, especially if you didn't grow up on a farm. Or you can always ask to do ride-alongs. You can ask to do ride-alongs with vets. And not that anybody asked, but I also give another piece of advice. I went to Madison for all 4 years, but they're not better options, but there might be better options for other people. My husband also graduated from Madison, but he spent 2 years it was Marathon County, now it's part of the Stevens Point campus, before he transferred to Madison. And I think that sometimes is a good option, not to feel so overwhelmed by going to such a large school to start with. And I guess I'm 50-50 on it. You miss on getting involved in some of the organizations and opportunities on campus, but it's a little bit easier to ease into college if you maybe start at a smaller school versus jumping into the big pool right away.
Great suggestions, especially with, I don't think that there's a farmer I've talked to that is not looking for help. So I think that, if you are interested in getting into a farm and milking, and there you will see a direct connection between that dairy nutrition and the amount of production from those animals. So that's a great suggestion. Allison, do you have any other questions?
There aren't any questions in the chat. I want to just say I appreciate that you mentioned the research assistant opportunity or a TA opportunity that sometimes we forget about, and the tuition reimbursement opportunity. Um, Sometimes I think students and or parents forget that there's companies out there that are willing to invest in good workers. So thanks for mentioning that.